the selfie video here, but I totally forgot I was going to do this until this morning. So I'm in my car recording at my class. Okay, so FRQ Cheat Sheets. Obviously, if you're watching this, you want to hear me talk about it and not just read the handout. So let me just run down things real quick. Do make sure that you do the pre-write activities that Mr. Wayland and I have been requiring of you this year, because we required them for a reason. So for instance, we ask you to circle the verbs because we want you to pay attention to the verbs so that you know what type of writing you're being asked to do. Providing a definition is very different than providing an explanation, and there'll be different lengths, and that's why we had you circle the verbs. So do make sure that you're doing what you've been asked to do. Do pre-write. Think first, write second. It will help you prevent the problem of getting to the end or getting halfway through and realizing there was something you wanted to add in the beginning. Won't completely solve the problem, but it will help minimize it. Will decrease the likelihood that you have that happen. Do go through and estimate the points. And we asked you to do this because it's really just a way of asking you to help figure out how many parts there are to each question. So if it says, give an example of a phenomenon and then explain, you know that there's 2 parts, right? So 2 parts, probably 2 points. When you're writing your FRQs, do write something. Even if you think you're clueless, write something, anything for each question. It's statistically impossible to get a 4 or 5 if you don't at least try all 3 FRQs. Okay? Also, because even if you feel like you're really pretty much clueless about the FRQ, but you might maybe possibly, I don't feel good about it, but I think I might know, write it down because you might scrape points that way. You never know. Usually when your brain's tickling at you like that, it's your brain's way of saying you've actually got more of a clue than you think. You're just not confident about it and it's not quite sure, so it needs you to start writing so that it can find those connections it needs to give you the information. Plus, if nothing else, sometimes writing, again, will trigger those connections. So do write anything just to get yourself started. Do go through and label the parts of the question. It is a courtesy to the reader. It tells them where to look for the information that they need. But it also helps you make sure that you answer every part of the question. And again, you'll get points for things that are listed in different parts of the question. So if you address part of part A and part C, you'll get the point for it. It just tells your readers where they might want to look for it. When you're writing, I can't stress this enough, do address the prompt directly. I hereby and officially for these exercises give you permission to restate the prompt in your answer. Don't bother, they give you the description up at the top. Don't bother to rewrite that. You don't need to. That's unnecessary. But the A, B, or C piece, do rewrite that as part of your answer. It will just, again, help you make sure that you're focused and on track. If you do happen to forget something that you want to include, it happens to everybody. You can draw an arrow up to where you want to include it, write it at the bottom, or you can just label it, right? So if you're, it's A, B, C, D, and you remembered you wanted to add something to part B, add it below D and just label it as being part B. That's not a big deal. The readers expect that kind of thing. Even if it's on a separate page, okay? The pages actually have little boxes up at the top where they're going to ask you to write the FRQ number, so the readers will be able to find all the parts of your question. Okay. If you have a few extra minutes at the end, take time to proofread. You're not so much looking for spelling and grammar, although admittedly those are important. And if you can find and fix those mistakes, it will help your reader better understand what you're trying to say. But for the most part, really what you're looking for is, did I address all the parts of the question? Did I address the question directly? Is there anything that I left out that I now want to include? It's that last chance to kind of think through and say, is there anything else? Okay. My last FRQ tip, last one of the day. is that nothing says you have to write the questions in order. So me personally, I would read all of the questions, and then I like to start with the easiest because it's kind of a confidence booster. But you could start with the hardest, or you could start with the medium question. It's really up to you. Nothing says you have to do question number 1 first, question number 2 second, and question number 3 third. And you can go back and forth and pick and choose, even between parts of questions. The only tip I would give you if you're picking and choosing between parts of questions is that you make sure that each question is written on its own sheet of paper. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them to me when you see me on Wednesday, or send me a text, and I'd be delighted to give you any help I can with the FRQs. Part 2 of the handout, vocabulary. So if you walk out the door today with nothing else, I want you to walk out the door and know that if you spend your time prepping and do nothing else than learn vocabulary, that will be huge. That will be tremendously helpful for you on the test, both for the multiple choice. As you've no doubt noticed, a lot of the multiple choice questions are vocabulary based, but also on the FRQs, because a fair number of the FRQs include things like define the following term. So do go through and learn your vocabulary. The next question is then, how do I do that? I'm a big fan of flashcards. That's why I gave you guys all flashcard kits at the beginning of the year, was so that you could learn the vocabulary and that you would have a very effective and proven way to do that. And the reason why flashcards work so effectively is that they enable you to quiz yourself. So in other words, you literally look at the word and you try to recall what is the definition of that word. Studies show that if you spend the time to try and recall, that what that does is essentially interrupts the forgetting. Okay, so it puts the forgetting on hold and brings things back up to the forefront of your mind, and it strengthens those connections. So anytime you're prepping for a quiz or a test, and you can for any class, you can quiz yourself, you're going to help yourself do better in the long term. It also helps you remember information over the long term. My thoughts on flashcards again, use them. Take them with you. You can do them in the car or on the bus. You can earn some brownie points with your parents. I know they won't tell you this, but they would love to quiz you on your flashcards. Make brownie points. Have them quiz you. Trust me, you're going to screw up at some point in your life. You're going to want those brownie points. Okay. Or have your friends or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your significant other or your siblings work the flashcards with you. Okay. Absolutely anything you can do where you're quizzing yourself. Flashcards are a great way to do that. If you're morally opposed to flashcards, I don't know, maybe you don't like index cards. Who knows? But at any rate, okay, there's another way to do something very similar, and that is to take a piece of notebook paper, split it into 2 columns, and fold it over for the 2 columns. On the left-hand side, you're going to have your list of words. On the right-hand side, you're going to have your list of definitions. The reason why you fold your paper over is because you can look at the word list, try and recall the definition, then flip the page over, and then you've got much the same functionality as a flashcard without having to deal with the index cards. Okay. If you want to know how to do that, again, just ask me on Wednesday and I'd be delighted to show you how to do that. Other ideas or strategies for learning vocabulary, some of these we've already gone over in class. Pick a handful of vocabulary words from your big stack of flashcards or your list of vocab lists, all of which, by the way, are up in Blackboard in the appropriate folders. And then see what connections you can draw between the words that you've chosen. Okay. Do pick a card and see how many examples you can come up with of a phenomenon, like say, how many examples of pop culture can I come up with? And then also, other ideas would include things like drawing pictures. Doesn't need to be great art. Does not need to be great art. Nobody else is going to look at your pictures except you. What that does do is force you to really think about the concept. It's another way of quizzing your brain. And it's a great way, if you're one of my more artistically inclined kids, to help yourself out. Another option, write some multiple choice questions for yourself around those questions. Then find a friend who did the same and exchange questions with them. You do their questions, they do your questions, you come back, you find out the answers, you talk about the information. Voila, you not only have you practiced multiple choice questions, you've practiced vocabulary, you've been discussing key concepts. You get some help on the stuff you don't understand. It's a great system. You could, if you wanted to, record your definitions on your phone or on your computer and then load them up on your music player. Intersperse them with your songs and listen to them while you work out or while you're doing homework or other things. Okay, let's see, what else? Me personally, again, I like the flashcards. I used to do them before bed, and I would use them to help me fall asleep. One of those things about doing things right before you fall asleep is that sleep is when your brain consolidates information, and it starts with the most recent information first. Okay, so you do your flashcards right before bed, that's part of one of the first things your brain is going to move into long-term memory. So that's why I recommend that. If you don't want to take the time and the effort to go through and hand make the flashcards, you can go through and get an app like Quizlet. You could do them on your phone. Okay, there are tons of good flashcard apps out there. If you don't want to actually make them, you can download the Quizlet app and then you can borrow other people's, and you can do them like flashcards. A lot of times they have an audio version that you could use. If you don't want to just do the flip the card kind of thing. Okay. But again, just another way you could do those flashcards. And last but not least, one of those things that you could do to help, and I used to do this with science class all the time because I felt like there was lots of rote memorization that I wasn't going to use elsewhere, was to create a song or a mnemonic device to help you remember. And a mnemonic device is when you take the first letter of a series of things you need to remember, like say the rings in the concentric zone model, right? If you want to remember those, you take the first letter of each of those rings, and then you use them to create a silly sentence. And the silly sentence is what you remember, but then you use that as your cue to remember what are the contents of those rings. Okay. You can write your own. You could probably do some quick research and find some that other people have come up with online. Again, if you have questions about the vocabulary strategies or ideas, or if you want to give me some ideas of your own, I'd be delighted to take ideas and add them to my list. Have a good day, be good for the sub, study hard, and I will see you on Wednesday.